Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon Spoilers Sunday video. So this is the time of the week where I take a look at all of the spoilers that happened and, well, talk about them. So Bandai decided to do me a solid and, just release literally the rest of the set. They tend to do this where they'll just slowly trickle out some of their releases and spoilers, and then they just literally dump the rest of the set, which is usually like 40 plus cards, around the time close to its release. So we have a lot of cards to talk about, so let's just dive right in. I'll have the link to the website down in the description below in case you want to read any of the cards for yourself. So, without further ado, on to the spoilers. First up, we have a new blue digitama in the form of Hyarimon. So, Hyarimon, I've actually never seen this digitama before. I've never seen this Digimon before, so I'm curious to know where it came from, but either way, I'm happy to see new Digimon just because, well, they're new Digimon. So what's this card doing? He has this nice all turns inheritable ability. Hello, all turns on a Digitama? That seems pretty strong. While your opponent has no Digimon with Digivolution sources in it in play, then this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. So it's just playing along with the Attack the Inheritable Sources sub-theme that Blue likes to dip into, and it's rewarding you all turns for doing that with a DP boost for your Digimon. So I think this is a pretty decent Digitama to be playing around with just because of that all turns ability actually making that plus 1000 matter. So I don't think this is a bad Digitama at all. I don't know if this is exactly what Hexablaumon or Zulongmon needs, but it's still a decent Digitama to be thinking about nonetheless. Next up, we have a black Digitama in the form of Kyokyomon. So Kyokyomon is going to be the X-Antibody Digitama, and it's a pretty decent Digitama because it has this nice inheritable ability where during your turn, once per turn, when an effect places a Digivolution card under this Digimon, then it gets plus 1000 DP until the end of the opponent's turn. Ooh. So that's pretty good because the ability just persists throughout the turns. So the plus 1000 DP not only working on your turn, but on the opponent's turn as well is really valuable just because Black has lots of like blocker, reboot, and very defensive abilities that make it very hard for the opponent to try to interact with their Digimon. So this is just adding to that pool of cards to try to make it harder for the opponent to interact with them. And then on top of that, it's just acting as your stereo DP booster, so it's not like it's the worst card in the world just because you want to ensure that your Digimon could be just as strong as the opponents when you need them to be, and because X-Antibodies is playing around with putting cards underneath, I don't think this is going to be a very hard ability to trigger. So I think Kyokyomon is going to be a pretty decent Digitama for the X-Antibody deck to be using. Next up, we have Demimeramon. Hey, Demimeramon is back in purple again. But regardless, this Demimeramon is actually pretty decent because it has the nice inheritable ability where during your turn, once per turn, when a card is trashed from your deck, then you get to draw one card. So this is actually rewarding you for self-milling. I'm still not a huge fan of self-milling. I do think self-milling is just faster than drawing and discarding, but drawing and discarding gets you more specific setups and can help set up your synergies a little bit easier than just straight up milling, and you get to selectively pick and choose what tools you're going to be using and what you're going to be pitching. So even though I do think that drawing and discarding is still stronger, this is just acting as a nice draw engine for when you're trying to self-mill for a lot of those Demon Lord decks, and I think that's going to be pretty good to be using for those decks as a whole. Next, we have a new version of Skullmeramon. So Skullmeramon is in red now, and he just has, well, your vanilla Myotismon stats from BT08. So he's a red level 5, 6 to hard play, 2 to evo, 5000 DP, just nothing special, just a decent card to be playing around with. Next up, we have Marsmon. So, hey, another Olympus 12. That's always nice to see. It's a nice Digimon with the ability where during your turn, this Digimon can attack your opponent's unsuspended Digimon. Ooh, that's pretty good. Attacking into the opponent's unsuspended Digimon is just really, really strong because, well, that's kind of playing with what Gamamon wants to do, where it wants to DP boost your Digimon and then beat up the opponent's Digimon. So I know Red has a little bit of piercing synergy, and with all of the transition Digimon, we could probably figure out a way to give him piercing. So that's looking to be pretty strong of an ability to be playing around with. So already in my head, I'm already thinking of using something like JP to digivolve into a hybrid, to then digivolve into Master Tyranomon, to digivolve into Marsmon, to basically be able to pierce the opponent's Digimon and have security attack +1, and probably do some other things as well. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent card to be playing around with for just an uncommon. But only time will tell to see how people will actually use him and what other types of support this type of ability has, considering we already have some support for it already. Next up, we have Master Tyranomon. So Master Tyranomon is actually looking to be a pretty good card just because of all of the different ways we could use him. So what this card is doing is, stat-wise, he is a level 5 red and green Digimon, so that's pretty good, acting as a solid transition there, just because red and green doesn't really have a whole lot of transitions yet. And then on top of that, he could Digivolve for 4 off of red and green, but obviously if you're playing him with Taiga, that could be reduced. And then he's got 8000 DP natively, so he's just a little bit stronger than your average level 5 currently in the game. So he's already looking good stat-wise. And then on top of that, he has 2 abilities. He has an ability native to him and an inheritable ability. So the ability native to him states that during your turn, all your Digimon with Tyranomon in its name, including this card I'm guessing, gain security attack +1. So this is actually really, really powerful because not only could he give himself security attack +1, he gives all of your other Tyranomons security attack +1, so you actually could build one variant of a red-green aggro deck for Tyranomons just because of this card allowing you to give them all security attack +1. So in my head, the red Tyranomon line fits really, really nicely with this because, well, he could still evo off of red, so we could still go that direction. We could still use Taiga, and we do have some really powerful red Tyranomons. So just that first ability alone gives it already lots of depth and diversity because we could also play this with Rust Tyranomon, so we could Digivolve into a Rust and then in a secondary stack Digivolve into Master, so that's pretty decent. And he even has a nice inheritable ability where he just natively gives security attack +1, so whatever Digimon he's going to be Digivolving into will just have an additional security check, which is pretty good because it allows you to deal extra damage. And the fact that he's a 2-color level 5 means that we could extend this into a whole bunch of different directions based on just all of the different 2-color synergies we could be playing around with. So I think this is going to be a pretty spicy card to be playing with as a whole, and I'm excited to see what people come up with for this card. Next up, we have Snow Agumon. Hey, there's the blue Agumon everyone was anticipating. Now there's officially an Agumon-type card in every color. But regardless, what this card is doing is he has an on-play ability where we get to trash the top Digivolution card of one of the opponent's Digimon. Hey, so it's basically like a promo Gabumon, where the promo pack 0.0 had a Gabumon with this type of ability, so we get this on an Agumon, and this is actually trashing the top, where that Gabumon was trashing the bottom, so we have just different ways to play this card, and it's supporting the sub-theme of trying to attack the opponent's Digivolution sources. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent card to be playing overall. Looks like there is a bit of a typo. It's definitely not a Rookie-Roo. But either way, it's not a bad card. I don't know how good the card's actually going to be in the long run, though, given the current state of the game. But I think it's definitely a fun card to think about. Next up, we have Surfymon. Hey, a new Digimon, I think. I've actually never seen this guy. But he is another vanilla card, so he's just your like Mega Zoo type card, where 10 to hard play is actually pretty cheap for a Mega with 13,000 DP. He fits into the color combination of blue and black, and well, he's just a solid level 6 if you're just using him just for his DP, because 13,000 DP for a card is still pretty decent, and the fact that he has 2 colors. So I think this card is a pretty spicy card. I don't think he's going to see a whole lot of play. He might see like some experimental play with like Megazoo, but I think Megazoo as a whole kind of changed on how it wants to play, and it wants to support more powerful when digivolving abilities rather than just hard playing Megas and then just asking the opponent to deal with it. But the fact that you still have that ability to do that with this type of a card is still really, really good because it adds depth and diversity to how that type of a deck can be played, and the fact that he's 2 colors is more supporting the fact that you could play almost whatever level 7 that you want to play, because that's where the true power of a Megazoo comes from, is more so the level 7s trying to be as powerful as they possibly can, asking your opponent to respond, or you're going to respond in kind with a level 7. So I think Surfymon is another pretty decent card to fit into that Megazoo type strategy. Next up, we have Captain Hookman. So Captain Hookman is a level 5 blue Digimon. What this card is doing is that he has an ability where during all turns, when an opponent plays a level 5 or higher Digimon, then you get to gain a memory and draw a card. I think this is a pretty decent card. I don't necessarily think this is going to be super great, just because it is going to be a level 5 that you're going to have to sit passively on the field. I think if this was an inheritable ability, it's a little bit easier to sit on a Mega than it is to sit on a level 5, just because of how much removal there is in the game. But regardless, this is still a pretty decent ability to have, because it does kind of like counter certain types of strategies, or at least taxes them and rewards you for playing this way. So it's not awful, but I don't think it's that great. Next up, we have Frosset Velgermon. I've never seen this Digimon either. There's a lot of Digimon I haven't seen. I guess these must be new. But regardless, this is actually a pretty decent level 6 up blue Digimon to be playing around with. It looks like he's playing around with like the Hexablaumon type strategies, where he's just going to try to attack the opponent's inheritable abilities. So what this card is doing is when Digivolving, you get to trash the top Digivolution card of one of the opponent's Digimon, then return one of the opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources back to its owner's hand. So trashing the top on all of them is pretty decent, considering trashing the bottom is what we've been playing around with most of the time. So it's nice to see the difference on what we could trash, so that way we could kind of toolbox which ones we want to prioritize based on what the meta is looking like, because sometimes you do want to try to attack the top, and then sometimes you do want to try to attack the bottom. So it just depends on what they're playing and where their abilities are, on which ones you'd prefer to trash. And then on top of that, the bounce ability tied to the when Digivolving ability isn't bad, because blue kind of has this lack of removal. So the fact that we do have Digimon to at least try to remove Digimon off of the field, even if it is returning them to their hand, is still pretty good, because it's a good anti-tempo swing. And then it also has a secondary ability where during your turn, all of your opponent's Digimon gain when attacking, trash the bottom Digivolution source from this Digimon. So that's actually a pretty strong ability, especially played with something like Hexablaumon, where the idea is they're just going to attack with their Digimon, and then they're just going to lose their source, and then they won't be able to make any follow-up attacks with that Digimon, as long as they don't have any sources, because Hexablaumon will stop them from doing that. So I think this is a pretty decent ability to be playing around with. I don't know how strong it is, considering I do think just the punch aspect that Azulongmon offers is just a better support for something like Hexablaumon, but I do like the depth that they're trying to give this type of strategy, and all of the different tools that you could be playing around with and interacting with. Next up, we have Elecmon. So Elecmon is in yellow, and, well, he's just a very vanilla card, because he's not doing anything. So he's just your stereotypical level 3 hard drop for 3, 0 to Evo, 4000 DP card. I don't think this card's going to see a whole lot of play, just because the stat line hasn't seen a whole lot of play. I don't think it's going to be seeing any play at all. Next up, we have Dinohumon. So Dinohumon is going to be another 2-color level 4 Digimon. He's Digivolving off of it red and yellow, so he's going to be supporting that. And this is the type of 2-color card I'm not a huge fan of. So again, they proved that they could do it right, and they proved that they could do it wrong. So let's just see what this card is doing. So he has a when attacking inheritable ability, not limited to once per turn. Okay. One of your opponent's Digimon gets up minus 1000 DP for the turn. So just a very basic ability, but the most of the time you're just going to want to use this card just because he's 2 colors, and that's the only thing you care about, with the ability being the icing on the cake. So I think this is going to be actually a pretty decent card, considering red and yellow already seems to have one of the stronger color pairings, and yellow and blue seem to be able to extend into a lot of various different colors, more than some of the other colors. So I think this is actually going to be a pretty decent card. I don't know exactly where he's going to fit, so we have to do a lot of like theory crafting to figure out how good this card's actually going to be, and if this card's going to be seen or used at all. But I don't think this card is bad by any stretch of the word, just because, again, you're going to be using him mostly because he's just an unrestricted 2-color card. Next up, we have a new version of Azulongmon. So that's kind of interesting, the fact that Azulongmon's getting an alternate form. And this time he is going to be a 2-color Digimon supporting yellow and blue. What this Azulongmon is doing is he now has the stats of your stereotypical level 6, Evos for 3, either off of blue or yellow, so he has that flexibility depending on what color deck you're running. And then he is a yellow and blue Digimon with 11,000 DP, so he's pretty alright already. And then he has this nice ability where when attacking, you may trash the top card of your security stack to gain 2 memory. That's pretty decent considering we have stuff like Dynasmon and all of the stuff from BT06 that interacts with trashing or removing cards from your own security, so he pairs nicely up with those. And then he also has another upside where during your turn once per turn, when one of your other Digimon digivolves, you get to unsuspend this Digimon. So a multi-attacking ability attached to gaining memory on his ability, that seems pretty strong. So the whole idea seems like you want to swing with this card after digivolving up into him, trash your own security, trigger your various inheritable abilities, gain some memory, and then digivolve to unsuspend him and then trash again. So you can make some pretty aggressive plays with this card based on the type of deck that you could be playing around with. And I think that's going to be pretty spicy, on top of the fact that he is just a 2-color Digimon, which seems to be getting some more and more support. So I think this is going to be a pretty fun card to be playing around with for a low rarity level 6. Next up, we have Namakemon. So Namakemon is going to be a green Digimon. This is in the Pulsemon line. So I guess the theory around the Pulsemon alt art is debunked because we were expecting this card to be black and get like some black Pulsemons. We still could possibly get that, but regardless, the fact that he's green isn't necessarily bad because he's just interacting with what green Pulsemon stuff wants to be doing. So what this card is doing is it has the main ability, you may suspend this Digimon to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, and then add 1 green Digimon among them into your hand, and then place the rest onto the bottom. So the green Pulsemon line wants your Digimon to be suspended, so the fact that you actually have the ability to just suspend one of your Digimon is actually pretty big, considering this is just a passive ability that you could do kind of whenever during your main. So that seems to be pretty decent, so that way you could always have like a green draw engine card on the field. So even though his stats are pretty weak, I think the ability is actually pretty decent because green has this huge lack in card draw, and they rely on digivolving more often than not to try to draw cards, and now we have kind of like a draw engine card built into what green could be doing. Next up, we have Tyranomon. So Tyranomon is just another green vanilla card. It's following in the footsteps of Purple's Marsmon, where it just hard plays for 5, it evos for 1, and has 5,000 DP as just a vanilla card. I think there's just better cards in green for you to be playing around with. Well, we have Vegemon, which is basically just a better vanilla card because it's 6,000 DP, evos for 1, and has 4 to hard play. And then we have lots of cards with inheritable abilities that also evo for 1 in green. So I'm not necessarily hating this card. I do love its art and style, but I do not think this card's going to be played just because we already have better alternatives. But in case beast typing in green actually does matter in the future, then this card might actually see some play, but I highly doubt that. Next up, we have Climbmon. So hey, more Pulsemon evolution stuff. So Climbmon is going to be a level 5 Digimon for green. It has 8,000 DP, evolves for 3, pretty decent. And then it has 2 abilities, 1 native to it, and then 1 as an inheritable. So the ability native to it is a when digivolving ability. If this Digimon is suspended, then you get to return one of the opponent's suspended Digimon with DP less than or equal to this Digimon's DP to your hand. So this actually is a pretty decent ability. So what you could do already just on this first part alone is you could move your Digimon out of raising, then Digizorb for 2 with Agumon, get your Digimon suspended, then Digivolve into this to try to remove one of the opponent's Digimon on the field. That's pretty solid. And then on top of that, it also has a nice inheritable ability where during your turn, when this Digimon becomes unsuspended during your unsuspend phase, you get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon. So green also likes to be playing around with suspending, so I think this is a pretty decent ability to have, just because when your Digimon's going to be unsuspended, suspending one of the opponent's Digimon means that you're going to make whatever Digimon this is on underneath attack into that Digimon, and then green also has lots of piercing and various other abilities, so I think this is a pretty solid card to be using for green. Definitely way better for Shivamon than the other Pulsemon line. Next up, we have a new version of Spinomon. So Spinomon is just that vanilla 2-color stat line that we've seen already so many times, where evos for 3 off of the respective colors of red and green, hard plays for 10, 13,000 DP, just a solid red-green card to be playing overall for that Mega Zoo type strategy. Next up, we have Kokuamon. So Kokuamon is making the color transition from green to black, and this card is pretty decent because it has this nice all turns ability where players can't ignore Digivolution requirements. So there are just a decent amount of cards in the game that say you could ignore the Digivolution requirements, and well, this is a counter card to all of those, saying now they can't ignore the Digivolution requirements and they actually have to pay attention to them. Next up, we have Thundermon. So Thundermon is going to be supporting the Mamemon deck because it has the nice ability where this card's name is also treated as Mamemon. So it's just supposed to be interacting with all of the Mamemons, trying to add to the Mamemon deck, considering a lot of the Mamemons are at level 5 and up, so it's nice to see that they get something for their lower levels. Next up, we have Ginryumon. So Ginryumon is going to be that level 4 Black X Antibody Digimon that we were missing before. So what this card is doing is it has the inheritable ability where during the opponent's turn, while this Digimon has X antibody and its trait, then it gains blocker. So gaining some DP, getting reboot, having blocker, just really makes your Digimon that much harder to be interacting with, and it could help stall out the opponent while you could aggress. So I think giving your X antibodies blocker is just really, really good, just because, well, you can make them into basically a really powerful Digimon with lots of different keywords. Next up, we have a new version of Psychmon, where Psychmon is another anti-meta card, where he has a all turns ability, players can't reduce play costs. So we're starting to see them play around with these types of anti-meta cards more and more. For me, these are more like sideboard cards if Digimon actually had a sideboard, just because against certain decks, these abilities might be useless, but against other decks, these abilities are actually really powerful and really potent on trying to shut out what the opponent is trying to do. So I think this is a really good ability just because there's a lot of cards that want to reduce their play costs in the game. So this card is just really good at shutting those out while being a decently statted level 3. Next up, we have a new version of Devimon. So this is a pretty decent card considering it has an on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add 1 tamer among them into our hand, and then trash 1 purple card from among them, and then place the rest onto the bottom in any order. So purple didn't really have a good tamer digger, so the fact that we do have a tamer digger while it's also filling up our trash selectively is really, really valuable, and then the last card will just go to the bottom of the deck, which is okay. The fact that this is also a Devimon means you could run this in like a Dan Devi deck, just because the more Devis you have, the easier it will be to fill up the trash for Dan Devi and the promo Demi Devi to actually trigger. So I really like what this card is doing as a whole for purple. Next, we have a new version of Mushroomon. So Mushroomon is making the color shift from green to purple. And, well, this card is just another blah vanilla card where it's not really going to do much. It's not going to see a whole lot of play. And I don't think it's going to be that great as a result. Next up, we have Soulmon. So Soulmon is going to be a purple level 4 Digimon. Stats aren't doing anything too special, but it does have a nice your turn once per turn ability. When a card is trashed from your deck, you get to gain 1 memory. So this is just supporting self-mill a little bit more, and that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, considering there's a lot of cards that do just want to self-mill, and the more we self-mill, the faster we could fill up our trash to trigger lots of our abilities. So I don't think this card is going to be that bad of a card to be playing as a whole. Next up, we have Fangmon. So Fangmon is just another blah card. This card really isn't doing a whole lot. Yes, it does have retaliation, but I do think there's still just better cards to be playing. Like, if I wanted to play a card with retaliation, I could just play Devimon, even though Devimon from BT08 does have 1 more play cost. The DP is the same, and he actually has the inheritable ability of giving retaliation, making him just a better card to be using. You could consider trying to use this card in like the Venom Myotismon deck to try to use the fact that he has retaliation, give him rush, but I don't necessarily think that deck is that great or it's going to matter a whole lot, so I don't think this card is going to see that much play. Next up, we have Karatenmon. So Karatenmon is just, well, another vanilla card. It's not really doing anything because, well, it has no abilities. It's just following in that same footsteps of the Myotismon stat line, where 6 to hard play, 2 to Evo, 7,000 DP as just a level 5 vanilla. It's not bad, but it's not great either. Next up, we have a new version of Myotismon. Hey, kind of expected a Myotismon in the set, considering we had Mallow Myotismon in the set, or we have Mallow in the set. But what this card is doing is it's actually a pretty decent Digimon, having a native ability and an inheritable ability as a level 5 with 8,000 DP. 8,000 DP seems to be the new normal for a lot of cards going forward, so we are seeing a little bit of, not necessarily power creep, but power spiking in the stat lines just because, well, before we were playing with lots of level 5s with 7,000 DP. So they are slowly moving that DP threshold up and up. Not all of the cards are following in this footsteps, but a lot of like the more highly played ones are. So that's just one thing to take a note of. But regardless, this is a Myotismon card, so he does have a lot of Myotismon-based synergies. And then what this card is actually doing is his native ability is a when digivolving ability. We get to trash the top 2 cards of our deck to then play one Oikawa from our trash for free. So that's pretty good considering Oikawa just wants to put himself into the trash to res Mallow Myotismons, which is already strong. Plus, this is also filling up our trash, so that's pretty good, allowing us to trigger lots of our self-milling synergies. So I think that first ability is already really, really good, just because being able to replay your tamers very efficiently is just, well, that strong, especially since Oikawa just wants to delete himself to have you be able to play your Mallow Myotismons for free anyway. So it's a really good ability to be playing around with, on top of the fact that he has a nice inheritable ability of On Delete. If this Digimon has Myotismon in its name, then you could play one Oikawa from your trash suspended without paying its memory costs. So again, it's just allowing you to try to play your Oikawas as efficiently as you possibly can. Most of the time, you're going to want to digivolve this into Mallow Myotismon, so that way, well, when Mallow Myotismon gets deleted, you could use Oikawa to bring it back. So that's kind of like the whole synergy, is just, this card is just trying to play Oikawa as efficiently as you possibly can, which is not a bad thing considering what Oikawa wants to do. Next up, we have Rasenmon Fury Mode. So Rasenmon was the yellow mega that wants to interact with Digiburst from BT07. Stat-wise, this card's actually pretty good, having 13,000 DP for only evoing for 3 off of level 5 purple or yellow Digimon. So purple and yellow obviously is a color combination that has a butt ton of support, so I don't think this is going to be that hard of a card to play or to use. So what this card does is he has native to him a end of attack ability. You could digivolve this Digimon into a Rasenmon from your hand, ignoring its Digivolution requirements and without paying its Digivolution cost. So basically you swing with the card and then it has a very high chance of living because of its increased DP, and then you just get to digivolve it into another level 6, the normal Rasenmon. So that way you could then use its Digiburst ability with more inheritables. I kind of like that. And then it has the end of a turn ability where you get to trash the top card of your security stack. That's a little bit risky in case you don't have a Rasenmon, but I guess that's pretty good because the whole idea is you're just going to use it to get into Rasenmon, which is not bad. And then it has a nice inheritable ability to synergize with the fact that you're digivolving him into Rasenmon, where during your turn, when this card is trashed as a inheritable source by Rasenmon's ability, then we get to unsuspend one of our Digimon and get plus 3,000 DP for the turn. So this is really good because, well, you're going to want to swing with this card, digivolve into Rasenmon, use Rasenmon's Digiburst ability to be able to pitch this card, and then give him some more DP and unsuspend him for another attack. That seems pretty good. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent card to be using in that Rasenmon deck, but that Rasenmon deck hasn't really seen a whole lot of play, so I don't think this card's going to be that great in the long run, but I do like what he's doing for that type of a deck, and who knows, maybe this is the type of card to push that deck over the top, and maybe with all of the other synergies with yellow and purple, maybe somebody can make that card even stronger than it could be before. So who knows, it just takes some time and research and testing to see how good cards like this can actually perform. Next, we have a new red option card in the form of Fire Rocket. So this is a 1-cost option card, and what this card is doing is while you have a Digimon with armor in its form, then you could use this card without its color requirements. So another one of those, let's support low to the ground armor Digimon aggro. And then it has the main ability where your Digimon with 2 or more colors gain security tech +1. So that's actually pretty strong considering the deck already seems to want to be a very aggressive deck. And now that we have a way to give it security tech +1 on any of our armored Digimon, could be pretty decent. And then on top of that, it has a security ability where you get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with blocker, which is usually going to be one of the more annoying things for armor evolutions to be dealing with, is just being walled out. So having the security ability to delete blockers is pretty decent, especially since there's a lot of mid to high level blockers that people are going to be playing around with. So I think this is a pretty solid card to be using for that style of deck of just armor aggro. Next up, we have Crimson Blaze. So this is a 6-costed red option card, and what this card is doing is it has the ability to reduce the memory cost of this card by 1 for each of the opponent's Digimon in play. Hello, so if the opponent just has a wide field, then this card just becomes more and more efficient to use. And then what this card's actually doing is it has the main ability where you get to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with 6,000 DP or less, and then your opponent can't play Digimon by card effects until the end of their turn. So this is actually a really strong ability because this shuts out just a lot of aggro type strategies. So what this card is doing more specifically is it seems like it's a good anti-tech card to D-Brigades, because the big power of D-Brigades is being able to use your Commandramons to spawn more Commandramons, replacing the ones that are being deleted. So the fact that this can shut that out is really powerful. The fact that this deletes all of the opponent's Digimon with 6,000 DP or less is really, really powerful, because basically this will affect almost every level 4 outside of a small handful. And then it has the security ability of activating its main effect, which could be, again, pretty brutal considering now if this is checked in the security. The important part is your opponent can't play Digimon by card effects, so that's really, really strong considering there's a lot of free casting potential that a lot of colors have to play around with, like purple and yellow, so it's just looking to be a very strong option card to be using as a whole. Next up, we have a 3-costed blue option card in the form of Innocent Blizzard. So Innocent Blizzard is a pretty solid blue option card because it has the main ability to trash to the bottom Digivolution source of all of the opponent's Digimon. Then up to 3 of the opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources can't attack or block until the end of the opponent's next turn. So this is a really good defensive type card to just play around with the fact that you're already going to be trashing the opponent's inheritables to try to, well, trash them even more, and then gain some sort of benefit for the opponent having Digimon with no Digivolution sources. So we've seen this type of ability be played a couple of different times before, and I think that it's nice to just flesh it out and give it more powerful cards to be playing around with, just because like what we were doing before was just using something like Howling Memory Boost to just try to do the same type of ability with delay, but it's only stopping one of the opponent's Digimon. So again, this is another like anti-Rookie Rush-esque strategy where you're going to try to pick off the opponent's inheritables and then make it so that their Digimon can't do anything. So I think this is a good card to use for that. And its security ability activates its main ability, so it could also be used very defensively because of its security ability as well. So it's just a good card to be using or a good card to consider. Next, we have a green option card, but it's a 1-costed green option card with the main ability to suspend one of your Digimon, to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers. Hello, we actually get a little bit of Tamer interaction. And then your opponent's cards suspended with this effect can't unsuspend until the end of their next turn. So this is a pretty decent ability to have just because it's stun locking the opponent's Digimon down, which is never a bad thing for doing basically what Shivamon wants to be doing, which is keeping your Digimon suspended. So it's trying to use your Digimon on the field as a resource. Again, I don't know how good that strategy is actually going to be, considering there's just lots of removal for cards on the field, but I guess against like Blue and Hexablaumon, it's a way to actually utilize your cards with them actually not being able to do anything. So I think that's already pretty strong, and then it has the security ability to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers, so it's just a pretty solid option to be using for green overall. Again, I don't know in the grand scheme of things how good this is actually going to be, considering, like I said, there's just lots of removal to be able to pick apart board states, so it's just a cute card to think about, but I don't think it's going to be that great in the long run. Next up, we have a new black option in the form of Senbon Doken. But what this card is doing is it is a 9-costed black option card. That's a little pricey. With the main ability where you get to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, and you could play any number of Digimon with Mememon in its name, whose play costs add up to 15 or less among them, and play them for free, and then you get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with a memory cost of 6 or less for each Digimon played with this effect, and then trash the remaining cards. I guess it's a pretty powerful effect, considering you're basically just paying 9 to hard play 1 to 2 Mememons, and then possibly delete 1 to 2 of the opponent's Digimon. So that's not necessarily super bad, but I don't think it's super great either, because I'd rather just play a better removal card or play a better card to try to play my cards more efficiently. But regardless, it has the security ability to activate its main effect, and I think that's where the true power of this card is coming from, is just being able to spawn Digimon on the opponent's turn because of this ability. So this is a pretty interesting card to be playing around with. Obviously, it's supposed to go into the Mememon deck, but again, I don't necessarily know how good that Mememon deck is going to be or what type of support it's going to get in the future, because there's still just a decent amount of Mememons we don't have. So it could be good, but I'm leaning more towards this card's not that great, considering hard playing this card is something that's especially with the risk of this card whiffing. So you kind of need to play cards like Izzy to try to rig the top to know when to use this type of a card. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but like I can see its potential. And then the last card that we got spoiled is going to be Imperialdramon Paladin Mode. So, oh my god, this card is really, really strong. So what this card is doing is it is a white level 7 Digimon. It evos for 7 off of blue and green. Obviously, we could probably reduce it, and he's probably going to have a way to reduce it himself. And then he's hard playing for 15 and has 16,000 DP. So that's more than Omnimon. Yeah, that is more than Omnimon. So I think Imperialdramon Paladin Mode actually takes the prize for the strongest natural DP Digimon in the game. So we've already seen this kind of like shift towards higher DP amounts with level 5s. So they might be doing it with level 7s. I don't know. It might be something special to Paladin Mode. Again, I don't know. But we are seeing this increase in Digimon's DP. So yeah, that's definitely something to take note of, knowing that this Digimon has the highest natural DP in the game. And then this card has some pretty decent abilities. So what this card is doing is when one of your Digimon digivolves into this card from your hand, you get to return 1 white level 7 from your trash to the bottom of the deck to reduce the Digivolution cost by 4. So note it has to be a white level 7 Digimon. So the easiest thing that I could do to set this up is just, well, either use Hidden Potential if I'm digivolving off of a green Digimon to reduce it by 5. So that's pretty decent. And then on top of that, you also have the ability to use 60% win rate to discard a white Digimon card to set this ability up. So when you digivolve into it, you get the discount on 60% win rate on top of the discount of Imperialdramon. So the double discount basically can make him evo for free, and that's pretty decent. And then this card has a when digivolving, when attacking ability. So you get this ability off when you digivolve into him, and then every time you're going to be attacking with him. So you could potentially digivolve him and attack to get this ability off twice. So what this ability is doing is you get to return 1 2-color Digimon from his Digivolution sources to the bottom of your deck to trash all of the opponent's Digivolution sources off of one of their Digimon. So it's just basically getting rid of their whole stack, and then the added bonus for doing that is then you get to return all of your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources to the bottom of their deck. So it's just your basic tuck removal type of ability, which is pretty good, especially since he has the ability to remove a lot of the opponent's Digimon stack to set up the second part. And the important thing to note with this card is this second part of the ability is actually independent of the first. So you don't have to use the first part of this ability in order to get the second part, because the way it's worded, they are kind of separate. So every time this card is going to be swinging at worst, you're going to always be able to trigger the ability to return to the bottom of the deck an opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources. So this is going to be a really powerful card to be using, especially in the new like Imperialdramon Jagras type deck, just because we do have lots of 2-color Digimon for this card to be playing with. We do have 60% win rate to help fill up our trash with the specific cards we need to get this card to be at a reasonable cost. We do have a green to be playing off of to help use Hidden Potential to reduce its own cost. So I think this is going to be a pretty strong card to be playing around with for the new Imperialdramon deck as a whole. Oh boy. That was just a lot of cards to take in all at once, and, well, the set's going to be released in about a week in Japan, so it kind of makes sense that they had to release all of those spoilers all at once. I think they could do a little bit better on timing when and how they're going to be spoiling cards, but I guess dumps like this just kind of show how fast the game is moving and how new sets are progressing. So I think it's a really interesting set to be playing around with as a whole, just because, well, we do have 2-color Digimon to be playing around with, and all of the new things that two-color Digimon bring to the table, just because now we could build decks in a new and varied way than we did before, and there's a lot of new and possible decks you could play based on the tools that they're laying out for us. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see what comes out of the set, and I'm really excited to see what people come up with. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.